Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, a resource designed to help your ministry take the next step. Whether you're leading a team, navigating church leadership, or preparing for the future, this podcast will help you with practical tools, real conversation, and lessons learned from those who've been there. I'm today's host, Michelle Dyer, Connection Minister at Brentwood Baptist, and today we're talking about connection ministry, helping people find where they fit in the body of Christ, and equipping them to serve in ways that align with their passions and gifts. Joining me today are Haddon Finch and Stephanie Prince. Haddon, will you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at the church?
I would love to. So my name is Haddon Finch, and I serve as our membership minister here at the Brentwood campus. So I oversee our baptisms, our membership process, and our first-time guest follow-up.
Great. And Stephanie?
Thanks, Michelle. I am Stephanie Prince, and I currently serve as the Connection Minister at our Station Hill campus in Spring Hill, Tennessee. Connection ministry for us at Station Hill looks like a twofold part of ministry, overseeing guest services, everything from the parking lot into the worship center, and the membership process.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to have this opportunity to talk to you both today. Tell us a little bit about why connection ministry is such a big deal. Why do we make so much out of helping people find their place in ministry? Haddon?
Honestly, I think it's really how we view church and the function of the church. And so what I mean by that is I feel like our church, we view ourselves as shepherds of a congregation. And so when we have that responsibility, we have to ask ourselves, well, what are we shepherding people to? And when I think about that, I think about Peter and I think about Paul in 1 Peter chapter 4, in Romans chapter 12. They specifically tell us that we have spiritual gifts and that we are called to use them. And so when you think about that holistically, that's what I feel like we are called to do. We're called to shepherd our people into faithful obedience to the Christian life. And that involves helping them understand their spiritual gifts and how they were uniquely designed.
Yeah, so important.
I'd add on to that, too, that church was never intended to be a spectator sport. I don't know where along the lines we got this passive idea that you can just kind of show up to church, sit for an hour, and then leave. I mean, looking at Romans 12, spiritual gifts were created and given to us by the Holy Spirit for the building up of the body. So there is some intentionality. There is some active participation that is required of that. Yeah. And so I think it's our role as connection ministers, membership ministers, to help people find their place in the church.
Yeah. We talk about that as high expectation membership here at Brentwood Baptist. And so, I think that's two-sided. It's that we want our people to engage, but we also recognize our commitment to them as church leaders, to help them find their calling and to really engage that in ministry. And so I love that. So what happens when people don't have that connection, when they cannot find their place? What are some of the downsides that you've seen with that?
I think we were created for biblical community. So when people aren't in biblical community, aren't actively serving, aren't actively being a part of the congregation, then that leads to the biggest opportunity for the devil to step in. That leads to the lies, to the isolation, to the loneliness, to the disconnection, to the criticism. And so it really does the individual believer a disservice just as much as it does the church as a whole body a disservice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, we teach it in our Discover class. Why do we gather together? We gather together based on Hebrews 10. We gather together to encourage one another and to spur each other on to good works. And so when someone's not doing that, they are losing out on something for themselves, but they're also keeping that from other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it is such an important thing, I think, that there is that bridge between a person being a first-time guest or just a visitor. There has to be some mechanism, I feel like, in the church for us to be able to help people do those things which God calls them to do, to have a really intentional process. So, Steph, can you talk a little bit about the process that we have at Brentwood Baptist for our membership and why that's come to be?
Yeah, I love our membership process. It is a twofold process. We have something called Discover Us and Discover You. So we start with a 1 or 1.5 hour class where we sit down and share with people what we believe, why we believe what we believe, how does our church function and is structured. And then the 2 part of that is Discover You. So it's all about you, who you are as a believer, how you are uniquely wired and equipped and gifted for the kingdom. And then from there, we offer a coaching session, which is a one-on-one opportunity for them to sit down, review what they have just talked about in the Discover classes. We use lots of different assessments and tools and question prompts. This is an opportunity to process those things with a trained coach and actually find your place in our church. That coach helps them connect to groups, connect to serving, preschool, kids ministries, worship ministries, choir, everything in between.
So good. I have enjoyed the membership process too, and just the intentionality of it.
Yeah, people don't seem to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
They really are. It's very intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember for myself, like coming on staff almost 5 years ago now, and I just remember how blown away I was coming off the mission field, coming into American church, and I was just blown away that our church was willing to put the resources forward to invest in people in the way that they were. And I know for me, I was staying on staff, and so that made it was different. But I looked at everyone in that class, and I was like, we are investing in all of these people, and they don't even have to become members if they don't want to. And so some of these people may go to other churches or may find something else for them here in Nashville. But the fact that we were willing to invest so deeply at the very beginning spoke volumes to me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been part of churches before where, its membership is really important, but I loved coming to Brentwood and having this, opportunity where we really capitalize on that membership time and that process of making sure that we are stewarding well the people that God is bringing to us.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciated that, those who've gone before us had put this process in place that would be really intentional, and that we'd be able to get to know the people that are coming to our church and to hear their stories. Hadden, I know it's been really important for you to really learn the stories of the people that come to our church. Can you talk a little bit about, just the opportunities you've had because we have that intentional process in place?
Yeah. So that's probably one of the biggest blessings of my role is that, and I'm sure you can relate as well, is that we get to see every membership form that comes through the process. And so I am reading tens of hundreds, a year of membership forms, and I get to read their stories, and it's so encouraging to just hear and see what God is doing in their lives. And even not just through membership, but even in serving, just being able to sit down with people and hear their stories of why they're serving and what they want to get out of serving. There's some really cool stories that I can think of that are just beautiful in ways that God has worked in their lives and what He's calling them to.
Yeah, I think that if we don't slow down to hear those stories, sometimes for those that are joining us and who are walking through our doors, I think we miss a lot in the lives of our people. And so I've loved coaching for that purpose. And so tell us a little bit, Steph, about coaching and how, that looks for the people that come through the membership process.
Yeah, so we've got trained coaches that are ready to meet one-on-one, with each of the people that come through our Discover process. And so whether they're coming through Discover just to learn more about the church or doing this as formal membership, we welcome them to a coaching session either way.
Great.
And our coaches, their goal is to learn their story, hear their testimony. That helps our people figure out how to articulate their story. Yeah. We've heard time and time again, I've actually never shared my story. This was the first time someone walked me through my story. This is the first time someone helped me understand how to tell my story. I feel like we get that feedback a lot. And so that time together in that hour session to be able to articulate the gospel, how do you actually share what God is doing in through your life? And then understand how the spiritual gifts, I talk with my hands too much, keep hitting my microphone, how the spiritual gifts play into your life. Like how did God wire and equip you as an individual to be a part of his kingdom.
Yeah.
And so we've got stories too from coaches that meet with somebody and hear a passion about theirs and something like veteran ministry. Well, we don't have a specific veteran ministry at Station Hill, but they were like, I know somebody at the Av South campus from the North region of Brentwood Baptist who's got a connection at this ministry over here. And all of a sudden, this person now has ministry resources and a partnership with someone to be able to minister to the people that they were specifically called to minister to.
Right.
And so I love it.
Yeah.
For all different reasons.
Yeah. And that's such a good point that, it is about connection, truly, and making those connections between this dot and that. And so, Haddon, you work with our coaches here on the Brentwood campus. Can you talk a little bit about the coaches themselves? They're lay leaders. So can you describe what that's like for those coaches and how we get them involved?
Yeah, so I would say that our coaches, as you said, they're lay leaders. So they are people who have really just felt a passion. They may have a gift of hospitality, and they really just feel this need to help people along the journey. Specifically, when I think of some of the coaches in my head right now, they're people who don't want people to get lost in the process. We're a large campus. We see about 3,000 people on a Sunday morning. And so these are our lay leaders who just have a passion for that. And so there's different ways. Sometimes they find us and say, hey, I went through that process myself. I want to be a part of that again. But a lot of times it's us going to them and asking them, hey, we see this in you, this giftedness, this passion that you have, and we would love for you to join our team. And so what that looks like is, we have a training program set up for them that they go through. And so we can confidently tell our people coming through the membership process that these are trained Christian coaches because of the system that we have already set up, that you had a strong hand in setting up as well. And so these coaches are great. I think we have probably 15 or 16 on our campus, and that's a good size of a team for us and our campus here at Brentwood. And they're just a joy and a delight to work with and to lead.
And they're high capacity volunteers, so I feel like, if you're listening to this podcast, you have these people I know in your congregation who have that mentoring spirit. And they, like Haddon said, they just want to help people get connected. And so sometimes they really can multiply our efforts, I feel like, as ministers to be able to sit down one-on-one with our people, hear the stories, make those connections, and so at the conference that we'll be having in September, we'll be talking a little bit more about what it looks like to set that type of ministry up. But I find that that's one of the most valuable things I feel like about our process. I think if I had to choose, do they come to a workshop or do they have that conversation with that fellow lay leader, another church member who's just really wanting to help them get connected? I would choose that every time because that is really where the transformation, the connections happen.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah,
I see it kind of as a Jethro and Moses kind of moment. To where Moses was trying to do all of this on his own with the people of Israel. And for us, in our connection roles, we could easily say, okay, we're going to do all of this. But again, our size doesn't allow for us to do that and to minister in other capacities. And so it's really allowing, just as Jethro encouraged Moses, to figure out a different size that would take some off of him. Our lay leaders are the people who are really helping us do this. And if you think about it, some people are probably more willing to share truth with someone who's just a lay leader and their, the truth about what might be going on in their life and maybe where they're stuck or where they're struggling than they would with a minister. It's kind of that title situation.
It's true. And it allows them to meet another person they're going to see on Sunday morning. Different ways for connection to happen.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about Discover You and our class here. Steph, you mentioned that we use some assessments. Can you talk a little bit about how we go about helping people identify their unique gifts and their passions and why that's important?
Absolutely. We utilize three main or assessments. So we utilize the DISC profile, talking about personality.
Okay.
We utilize a spiritual gifts assessment, and we utilize a passion index. So people can actually go through question prompts, and it will help give them a score at the end, give them a color-coded report, kind of sorting and organizing where they fall in these different giftings.
Yes.
We never use any of these things as like a label. You're not stuck in a box just because you're this personality or you're this spiritual gift.
Right.
But we want to give tools and grab bars for people to actually help them understand and process. For me, I know personally, I can speak to when I came up through the membership process over 10 years ago. It was the first time I ever heard that administration is a spiritual gift.
Right.
I always,
Yeah.
I mean, and again, coming from a church background, coming from different various leadership roles in a church, I always thought spiritual gifts were like, well, that's the preacher up there. That's the spiritual gift.
Right.
I didn't realize that we all had spiritual gifts. I did not understand Romans 12. I did not understand some of these scriptures.
Yeah.
And so sitting down and looking at that and saying, oh my goodness, I scored so high on administration, hospitality, encouragement. These are my spiritual gifts. That makes a connection minister.
Right.
Like, oh, this makes sense of why I love what I do.
Right.
Because I was wired and equipped and gifted to do it. So seeing those moments, walking people through those tools and having them have the same kind of like aha moments, I love.
Yeah. It's a
And
big
then
deal.
I think we use a little formula called be, do, go.
Yeah.
So when we talk about like finding your calling,
Yes.
I walk everybody in our Discover You classes through these prompts. And it is be, ask some question prompts about who were you created to be.
Yeah.
So how do you share your story? How do you share a few sentences about your gospel transformation moment, ongoing sanctification? Do, what were you created to do? Where do your passions lie? What brings you life? And then go, where were you called to go and do these things and to be this person that God has created you to be? And that's inside and outside the church.
I
So I
love
think
that.
this class is phenomenal and vital to producing healthy believers inside and outside.
Yeah.
For God's glory.
So rich, I think, being able to help somebody discover not just different things about themselves that make them unique,
Yeah.
but how those things come together to do exactly what you just described, to help them find their calling, the big picture of what God is calling them to do at this season of their ministry. And so we talk a lot about every member is a minister. All are called. And so we really believe that every single person in our congregation is called to do something by God at different seasons of their lives. And so helping them identify that, I feel like people really appreciate that. And so that's great. So let's talk, though, a little bit about some of the pushback we've gotten at times for having a high expectation membership. Have you experienced that at all, Haddon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it really depends, especially on your campus within our Brentwood network, but it just depends on where they're coming from, what kind of background they're coming from. We have a lot of people who come from churches that never had a membership process to begin with.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're actually asking them to submit a membership form and to come to a Discover class and then to meet with a Discover coach,
Yeah.
that's a lot for some people. But then you have other people who are the exact opposite. And they've gone through a 12-week class before to become members. And so, yes, there has been a pushback. And especially with the tools that we use.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about the tools, with our DISC personality styles and the spiritual gifts and your passion index, like using all of those, what I have found is that most of the time they're fairly accurate. I think there's a lot of pushback on why do we use those? It's a computer generated thing. It's not going to tell me what I'm actually, who I actually am. And yes, they're tools. And at the end of the day, they don't define you.
Sure.
But I've found that they are fairly accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes people balk a little bit at that, thinking how can it really summarize, what I'm good at, or give me handlebars, like you said, to find points of connection. But I feel like when they finally do go through the process, they're 99% of the time grateful that they had those opportunities to explore what God's doing in their lives. And so I think we've tried to balance how long that process is and try to be respectful of people's time. And at the same time, we typically do not slow down long enough to explore those things unless someone kind of makes it a requirement, So,
the amount of times that people have said in our Discover class that they have never talked about spiritual gifts before, it's amazing.
It is amazing.
It'll blow your mind,
Yeah.
because it's just, for us, I mean, we're in that lingo all the time. We're talking about spiritual gifts and how you're uniquely designed and created. But for a lot of people, they come in having not talked about it.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really is. So why do you think it is so important for us as ministers to get to know our people as opposed to just trying to fill volunteer spots?
I think, what's the old saying? If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day.
Yes.
You teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime.
That's right.
I think we can, for only so long, plug and play slots. And so, I need 8 greeters every week, or I need 10 people in the parking lot. Like, I can throw people out there just to fill a need.
Right.
But then the next week, I'm going to, again, have 8 or 10 or 12 slots open.
Yeah.
But if I get to know people and find out what they're passionate about, why they're passionate about what they're passionate about, and then strategically place them in spots and leadership roles where they're able to use their passions and giftings, spiritual gifts, personality, I mean, all of those things, then I feel like I've created a disciple for life, or at least for the season that they're in our ministry in Middle Tennessee. Absolutely. And so I've watched people come to life who are encouragers, put them in a greeting role, and they stand at the door and they know everybody's name who comes through their door. They know, how is your knee surgery? You welcome back. I know your dad passed away a couple weeks ago. It's so good to see your face again. And then when they turn around and tell me those stories, it brings them life. It's like they're pouring out and being refilled as they're pouring out because they're ministering in their sweet spot.
Yeah.
And so,
That's great.
Every once in a while, we still have to grab people and be like, hey, a couple deacons, I need you to help in the parking lot because we're shorthanded because someone's out sick, or, summer vacation happens. It's 4th of July weekend. But I don't want that to be the norm. I want people to be growing and thriving in their roles rather than just plugging and playing random people.
Yeah, and we have to remember, too, like what spiritual gifts are. Spiritual gifts are the manifestation of the Holy Spirit inside of us.
Yeah.
And so when we think about that, if we're not getting to know our people, we are not honoring the Holy Spirit inside of that person.
Yeah.
And so it goes much further than just filling a spot or putting a person at a door or putting a person in the parking lot. It goes to actually honoring the Holy Spirit in that.
Right. And, when you engage a person's passions, this kind of goes back to what you said, Steph, that it makes all the difference in what that person puts forth in their ministry and how they feel they can really be energized in serving. If I identify that someone's passionate about serving in preschool ministry, that is such a different situation than where I'm just trying to plug a hole. And
there's ownership over it too then. And so I've found that my volunteers, they want things done. They'll do it on their own. Not all the problems come to me as the minister anymore. Right. I have team leaders, I have volunteers on the ground who are so passionate about their area. They're going to find a solution and they're going to implement it before I've ever heard about it.
Right.
Because it's their ministry area.
Right.
It's ownership.
It is. And it's difficult to get this process in place. It took us 5 to 7 years, really, of working to kind of figure out how do we get an intentional process in place. We do it during our membership process because, where else do you have a captive audience? If you have that requirement, it's a great place to require that they do some kind of intentional discussion with someone, like with the coaches, or where they take a spiritual gifts assessment, or they think about what they're passionate about. And so once you get that process in place, it begins to sort of just give you a catalyst for finding the people that will really be passionate about serving in your ministry area. So I feel like it's been really worth it for the effort that was put into it.
I love from a ministry standpoint, too, the database that we have from that then.
Yes.
So when an opportunity comes up that's like a one-off opportunity that's unique or special to something, I can look through and go, okay, I need someone who's real high in mercy.
Yeah.
I need, a couple volunteers who have the spiritual gifting of wisdom, or who are really hospitable to host this event at our church. And so I can look and ask individuals, hey, would you be willing to serve in this special capacity because I know who they are.
Yes.
And that's both database and from relational knowledge as well.
Absolutely.
I think when church membership is done well and the church actually gets to know their members, the entire church actually benefits.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's to your point. Exactly what you said, that our pastor gets to know who's out in the congregation.
Yeah.
He gets to know how he can communicate better to them.
Yeah.
Our ministry team leads, our ministers who are trying to continue to grow their ministry, they can then look into these assessment results and they can find out who's interested in this, who has a passion for this, and even our communications department. It helps them because we can specifically target a group of people who we know are passionate about this or who have a gift for this.
Yeah.
And that way, you're not having to say all of these announcements on a Sunday morning,
right.
and you have time for worship and everything else.
Yeah.
So it really, truly, when done well, can benefit the whole church.
Yeah. It really becomes an opportunity to develop your members. Like you said, disciple them. This really is the beginning of discipleship because in order to, I think, carry out the mandate that we go forth and make disciples, we need to know, what does that look like for me as an individual? How do I use my gifts? How do I use my passions to disciple others? Because the way I do that is not going to look the same way as the way that Haddon does it. So I think it's really important for churches to realize that we can keep it simple. We don't have to have an overly complex process in place. I would say it's really easy for a church just to do a spiritual gifts assessment, in their membership process or somewhere around there. And then just have I've talked to churches who have their deacons follow up with those new church members. Great way to get to know the deacons in the church. Life groups can do these types of things together and have discussions about how their passions and their gifts generate serving. Lots of easy ways, I think, to keep it simple, but yet intentional. Yeah. So let's do some rapid fire questions, shall we? All right, as we finish up today. What's one ministry area, Steph, where you've seen someone come alive after serving?
I would say the parking lot.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Tell us about
when
that.
they realize that it's not just parking cars because you're trying to move so many cars in and out of the parking lot, but it actually changes how someone approaches church. If they come in and they're frustrated in the parking lot, they're walking in with a frustrated mindset and a frustrated heart. And that is going to hinder them from hearing the gospel. So my teams, all of our goals is to remove as many hindrances as possible from the time someone turns onto our street into hearing the good news of the gospel to becoming a fully engaged church member. And so watching my parking lot guys really come to life after they realize they've helped somebody efficiently park, get, kids out of the car, special needs families, wheelchairs, to see them really help this process. First time guests that don't know where they're going, they are such a vital role of that to set people up for success, for gospel transformation that happens in the next step.
Yeah, that's great. Can you think of another ministry area that's sort of hidden or some way that somebody's gotten involved that was kind of surprising,
Honestly, our coaching. Again, our coaching ministry is really behind the scenes. Probably nobody just in general knows who our coaches are, but they're serving behind the scenes. And I can think of someone right now who just seen her come alive. She has the opportunity with her job and the flexibility with her schedule to meet with people. And she's continually meeting with people over and over again for us. And it's really cool that she has found that opportunity to serve in. Yeah.
And our coaching, we've talked about it in the membership process, but I'll just mention here that you can use that coaching beyond just your, helping people get engaged as newcomers. We use it kind of as an ongoing discipleship tool for, people who want to meet about all kinds of spiritual issues. And so I'll take this opportunity then to plug our Center for Christian Coaching here at the church that anybody listening to this podcast can participate in, and we'll put that in the show notes. Also, I'll put in the show notes today some information about our assessments. And I know a lot of people tend to have questions about that. And so we can put that information in there too if somebody's looking to develop their own assessment to be used in their church. So, all right, last question. For somebody who's listening out there today, maybe who's a church attender, not necessarily a church leader, what's one step that somebody listening can take to get more connected in the church if they're not connected? What would you recommend?
I would recommend, one, praying through it, and two, figuring out what are you missing? Like, what is the biggest thing that you're missing as far as connection?
Yeah.
Maybe that's becoming part of a group, or maybe that's serving.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, depending on where your relationship and your walk with the Lord is, sometimes you're growing, and so you're at a place where you're ready to serve. And then other times you're willing to serve, and through that service comes growth in your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's just finding what you're missing most and then taking that next step and trying to get plugged into that specific area.
That's so true. I remember coming here to, a big church, and when I was new, I think the first thing I did was serve at VBS down at Station Hill. And that was where I really first got connected. I met people. I felt like I was belonging to something that was bigger than myself.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think that's really just take that first next step.
And I think, too, there's a fear. Sorry, not to cut you off. I think there's also a fear that people are going to get stuck. Like, if they say yes to serving in this one capacity,
right?
One time, I think they're afraid that they're going to get stuck in that for the rest of their life,
right?
Or even just a misunderstanding of the time commitment that it is.
Yeah.
They may think that they have to serve every single Sunday, every single hour for for a certain duration.
Yeah.
But I would just encourage them to take that next step and not think about what kind of commitment that is, but just go ahead and say yes and see where the Lord leads.
Yeah.
I think an easy, tangible way going off of that to step into serving and kind of limit some of that fear or overcome that fear is to ask to shadow somebody. I'll encourage a lot of our new volunteers or people in attendance of worship, like, come back, shadow one of our greeters, see what it's like for a week, and then go shadow an usher or shadow the parking lot team or, shadow somebody, experience it. You don't have to come in and be perfect at it. You don't have to be the expert at it. Come in, learn what they do, see how simple and easy it is. See if it's a good fit for you. Does it fulfill you as much as you serve the church?
Yeah.
And if it's a good fit, then continue to stay on the team and serve. But
Yeah.
I'll always encourage, go up, find somebody in your church, find a greeter, find a connection minister, say, hey, can I shadow somebody this next week?
Yeah. It's a great model. I love it. Thanks for tuning in to today's conversation on Connection Ministry. From identifying passions and gifts to equipping and empowering people to serve with purpose. For more leadership resources, check out Elevate Church Conference, a one-day event designed to equip pastors, church leaders, and teams with practical strategies to lead well. Learn more and register at elevatechurchconference.com. Find today's show notes for key takeaways, and we'll see you next time on the Elevate Podcast.